Let's dive right into this explainer, where we're looking at two totally different eras that are actually united by one terrifying concept: overwhelming noise. Today, we're going to step back into the absolute physical and emotional chaos of 1916, right in the middle of the Battle of the Somme. And we're going to uncover exactly how that extreme historical environment connects directly to our exhausting modern search for truth in the digital age. I want you to imagine, just for a second, this sensory nightmare of the Somme. You've got freezing mud literally seeping into your boots. There's this relentless, bone-rattling boom of artillery that just never stops, and the air is incredibly thick with the metallic smell of cordite and damp earth. Now, imagine a young frontline soldier named Thomas writing a letter to his mother in the middle of all this. His hands are trembling so violently he can barely even hold the pencil. He writes, "They told us courage would make us legends, but all I see here are broken men."
What's absolutely staggering here is the massive disconnect. These young men were fed all this glorious propaganda, right? They were promised this grand adventure that would be over by Christmas. But the brutal reality on the ground? They definitely weren't becoming legends. They were just ordinary kids disappearing into a literal nightmare of mud, smoke, and pure, unfiltered fear.
Section 1. The Noise of the Trenches. Let's look a little closer at the sheer physical and psychological barrage that defined every agonizing second of a soldier's existence out there. Here we meet Arthur. He's an older, just totally exhausted veteran, and he's talking to our terrified new recruit, Thomas. Every single time a shell hits, shaking the dirt right off the trench walls, Thomas jumps. He's begging to know how anyone actually survives this. And Arthur's response just perfectly captures the profound psychological weight of it all. He tells him, "You don't survive it completely. Part of you stays here forever." Then comes the horrific sequence of the charge. It always starts with that agonizing wait for the commander's whistle. Then the order to go over the top. It wasn't some heroic, cinematic advance. It was sheer, chaotic panic. It's the deafening roar of machine guns, and you're essentially running straight into death, just hoping it misses you. Tragically, death doesn't miss Arthur. He falls in the mud, shouting for Thomas to keep going.
Section 2, a moment of humanity. Because amidst all this relentless noise and absolute destruction, we actually find something completely unexpected.
Thomas is crawling through this devastation, and suddenly he finds himself face to face with Karl, a wounded German soldier. Karl is weakly begging him not to shoot. Thomas aims his shaking rifle at him. And in that heavy, tense pause, Thomas asks a profoundly simple, yet absolutely heartbreaking question. Why are we fighting?
Karl's answer is deeply revealing. He says, "Because men far away tell us to." And then he slowly pulls out a photograph of his little daughter. Thomas just stares at it and immediately thinks of his own little sister back home. They both just admit right there that they are terrified every single second. And for just a few fleeting moments, the deafening roar of the entire war vanishes, totally replaced by this brief, silent, shared understanding of their mutual humanity. Now, this kind of shared humanity wasn't totally unprecedented. Think back to December 1914, during the famous Christmas Truce. Soldiers literally climbed out of their trenches for one night of peace. British and German troops were singing carols together, sharing bread, even playing football in no man's land. But the very next morning, they were ordered to start killing each other again. By 1916, that fleeting peace had devolved entirely into the mechanized slaughter of the Somme, driven entirely by the relentless orders of kings and generals who were sitting safely far away.
Section 3. The True Cost. We follow Thomas away from the battlefield now, into a dimly lit field hospital, to witness the profound emotional toll of surviving this relentless artillery. Inside the hospital, groans are just echoing off the damp walls. Thomas asks a nurse if she's seen Arthur, only to learn that he didn't make it. The nurse shares this heartbreaking truth. She says every day out there, boys die saving boys. Sitting there amidst endless rows of the wounded, Thomas writes down a devastating realization to his mother. "If I return home, I will never call war glorious again. There is nothing glorious about watching the world bury its sons." 16 million. It's hard to even wrap your head around a number like that, but this silent, massive figure represents the ultimate, unfathomable consequence of all this historical chaos. More than 16 million ordinary people, not the kings, not the generals, but regular people, died. And even those who did survive, like Thomas, they never truly escaped it.
Section 4, clarity from the noise. Now, the physical stakes of our modern world are, thankfully, vastly different from 1916, but the psychological mechanism of propaganda, extreme environments, and chaotic noise, that acts as a really vital foundation for understanding how we consume information today. Think about it. Just as soldiers were swept up by the deafening artillery and the top-down orders of kings, we face our own version of modern noise. We aren't dodging physical shrapnel, but we are facing a massive digital flood. We're talking loud headlines, endless scrolling, algorithms literally screaming for our attention. We are overwhelmed by an environment that is incredibly rich in information, but almost entirely lacking in actual clarity. This exact realization is what led to the genesis of the Atlas of 007 platform. It all started with a really simple observation while endlessly scrolling through news feeds. Headlines were loud, but the meaning was quiet. You know that feeling? Just blindly consuming information is definitely not the same thing as actually understanding it.
So, that frustration led to a very specific question. What if we could create something totally different? What if there was a platform that didn't just throw more news at you to add to the pile, but actually hit pause to explain what it all means?
Section 5, the Atlas mission. Let's dive into the core methodology of Atlas and how it practically cuts through all this modern chaos. The whole thing started incredibly humbly. No massive corporate setup, literally just a laptop and an idea. It was driven purely by consistency. Sure, there were moments of doubt, times when growth felt painfully slow, but the focus remained entirely on building a strong foundation and improving the message step by step. It was all about pushing through the friction to build something genuinely valuable, instead of just adding more volume to the internet's noise. And this methodology is exactly what empowers people to take back control. It's about simplifying complexity by breaking down these massive, overwhelming stories. It's about decoding global events so you can look right past the sensational headline and see the underlying mechanics. Ultimately, it brings real clarity to a world full of noise, helping you stop blindly consuming information and start truly grasping its impact. Because at the end of the day, Atlas of Time Series 07 is way more than just a page or another news aggregator. It is a mission to help you think deeper, see clearer, and stay ahead. It's a commitment to building something meaningful that actually helps people process the world more effectively in our hyper-connected, super loud modern era. So we've traveled from the deafening, tragic mud of the Psalm all the way to the silent, scrolling anxiety of the digital age. The noise has certainly changed its form, but its ability to completely overwhelm us, that remains exactly the same. So I'll leave you with this. In a world still defined by loud headlines and a total flood of information, how will you find your clarity?